As we get into implementing prototypal inheritance with constructor functions, I want to emphasize an important concept with functions. Whenever a function is created, it also includes the creation of a prototype property. Now notice I said prototype property. I'm not talking about the function's prototype object, which it also has. I'm referring to a property on every function. Let me show you that. So if I go to the console here, and I'm going to create just a test function really quick. It's not doing anything, but allow us to see something about this. And then I'm going to do console.dir so that we can take a look at what is in that test function. Okay. So inside the parentheses, I'm going to put test fun, and that allows us to open it up inside of Chrome, and we can see the properties that are associated with this particular function. So you can see some of the properties that you may be aware of. Arguments obviously are a property of function. Length, color, well, and name. Well, we also have this prototype property here. And notice it has an object associated with it. Now this is different from the prototype object, which is associated with the function. We can see that down here. And if we open that up, we can see the methods that are available to functions as a result of the prototype associated with functions. But this is a prototype property. And notice its constructor is what is attached here. Now, by default, the prototype property of all functions, as shown here, points to constructor. This basically refers to the function itself. And when a function is used as a constructor function, any object created will be assigned the prototype object pointed to by this property. All right? So by default, they would all receive constructor. Now let's take a look at that really quick. So if we look at our code as we have it currently, we have meeting room, we're creating a boardroom and a training room A. Let's just take a look at boardroom. Let me open this up a little bit more. Take a look at boardroom, and let's see what is on it. So if we open up boardroom, we can see down here the prototype associated with it. If we open that up, notice right here, constructor. And so that's the default that gets assigned. And that's really referring back to the function from which the object was created, from which we created boardroom, the meeting room function, that constructor function. So we see that that is done by default. But we can assign our own values to the prototype. And this is where we want to put the reserve method. So let's take a look at that. This is where it really becomes powerful for us, and we're able to add the inheritance, the prototypal inheritance that we want to. So now before we go ahead and create these two objects down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to link something else to meetingroom.prototype. So there's the property, if I can type it right, meetingroom.prototype. So we're accessing the prototype property right now. And I'm going to add something to it. What I'm going to add to it? Reserve. And this is going to be a function. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that function, D10. We'll just do it the same way we've done in the past. It receives those two items, and then all it does is this .schedule, .push, and then we're pushing an object onto the array with the date object and the length of time. Okay, so there we've added something to that prototype property, to the prototype property of the function, the constructor function. Now when these objects right here are created, the boardroom and training room A object are created, they will receive as a prototype the object that is pointed to with this prototype property. So it's going to have the reserve method on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So if I save this, and let's look at boardroom again, open that up. And if we open up the prototype associated, notice we have the reserve method. So we can use that. We can do boardroom.reserve, And then I'll just use something I've used in the past. So let's go ahead and make it 60 here. Go ahead and use that. Do a new date. This time we're specifying the date. We go ahead and add that to the schedule. So if we look at boardroom.schedule, we can see it has an object inside it. We open it up and we can see what that object is. Oh, and it's telling us it's an invalid date. So I didn't put a valid date in when I was creating that new date, but you get the idea. This would allow us to add to that schedule, and it's borrowed from the prototype. The reserve method is not on the boardroom object itself. And so that's inheritance. That's how we do prototypal inheritance. Now, just hitting on some of those OOP pillars that we talked about before. Abstraction, remember, abstraction. We're seeing abstraction in the reserve method. It's not complex, but we still are hiding the complexity of what we do to reserve a room, what we do to do that. We're hiding that complexity from the user. All they have to do is pass in information to that reserve method, and it works for them. So that's abstraction. And then these objects that we've created down here, they encapsulate both data and methods. We have this one method on the prototype. We have all of this data here. Now, if we wanted to add additional things to the prototype here, we could do that. So I would just do meeting room.prototype. Let's say we wanted to add a company name. We wanted all of the objects to have that. Company, ABC, whatever. All right, so we can do that as well. We just continue to add those to the prototype. Now, there is an additional way we could do this, but I prefer this technique. I prefer addressing the prototype and adding to it. However, you could set the prototype to a brand new object if you wanted. Let me show you what that would look like. So I'm just going to copy in this code. Instead of these lines here, we could do something like that, where we're setting the prototype to an object. Notice that as a reserve method, we could then add the company like this. And we basically set that prototype to a brand new object. And I don't prefer this method, and we're going to talk a little bit more about why in the next topic when we look at some of the commands that are available for us. All right, let's move on.